There we go. Once again, thank y'all for joining me. I'm sharing my screen, so I may take longer pauses to access our chat for the moment. But I'll go ahead and get us started. I hope you got to have a good break and get a chance to take care of any of your needs and take a little bit of rest from the screen. So first off, what are we talking about? First, we'll be talking about why is working with other self-advocates important, how to meet self-advocates who share your goals, how to find ways to use your skills towards your advocacy goals, how to work with people who think differently from you, how to talk to people about the issues that you care about, and how to make advocacy work accessible. Ryan, I am not sure if your audio is on. A good moment to check in on is, can folks hear me? Because I realized I just started talking. Please feel free. I will see you. Okay, beautiful. I'm seeing yeses. Thank you so much. I'm glad that my sound is coming through. So going in, the first question we have is, why are we working in community? And the big reason that I like to encourage folks to work in community and also make sure that they're looking to see what folks are already doing is we are stronger together. No movement for equal rights can survive if we are all trying to do our own thing, because of the combo deal of systems, as Jules was illustrating, are huge. They are not created by a single individual. They are created by many people over time. And in the same way, movement is created by many people over time. No one self-advocate can hold all the responsibilities of making change. And we don't all have the same skills. No one person can have all the skills needed to wave a magic wand and fix whatever issue that we care about. Working together both keeps us healthier and our communities healthier. So first off, how do we find community? One of the main things that, and I know this came up in the previous session about like picking an issue. And you don't have to just have one issue that you care about and you focus all of your heart and soul on that one thing. You can have multiple things that you care about, but finding an issue that you care about first can really help you figure out what you want to be doing. So for example, it can be something big like LGBTQ rights as a whole, or it can be a smaller issue that's connected to a bigger one. So in this example, say, stopping LGBTQ plus books from being banned in libraries and schools. Now, once you pick an issue that you care about, start searching around and seeing if you can find groups in your area that also care about this issue, and are already doing work around it. And if you can find local groups, that's fantastic. And you can go to their meetings, whether they're virtual or if they are taking precautions and you feel comfortable going to their in-person meetings, you can do that as well, of just going to the meetings or their events and learning what kind of work they've been doing, getting a feel for them, and deciding if you want to work with them on this issue. If you are in an area where you can't find other folks who are actively meeting on these things, then look online and see what work is already happening on that front. So for example, like in saying, looking for people who are already doing this work, if we're following let's focus on the example of the LGBT book ban. You might not find a group that's specifically dedicated just to that, but you might find LGBT advocacy groups in your area that are interested in doing that work. You might even find like PFLAG groups, which are parents of LGBT kids who might be caring about that stuff. Thinking in that way about your issue, if you can't find a specific group that's already just working on that, think about who's impacted by this problem that I care about, and seeing if you can find groups that are organizing in those communities. And as we go into community work, we're thinking about like sharing and learning ideas. So here's the thing, when we are getting into advocacy, um, no one is expected to know everything about a problem. I've been doing advocacy work for about 15 years now. And frankly, there's a lot of stuff I don't know. I also honestly just have memory issues. So it's very helpful for me to periodically, particularly if I'm deciding I'm going to be active and engaged on a subject, to just start looking up what's currently happening. And especially in the context of like legislative advocacy that ASAN does, legislative advocacy moves very, very fast sometimes and can become very complex depending on whether it's at a local level, a federal level, or a state level. And so being able to look up trustworthy sources on a subject can be extremely helpful in getting yourself educated. And when I'm saying a trustworthy source, a measure that I like to use for whether a source is trustworthy or not is, one, if they are citing something that they are telling me is a fact, where are they telling me where they got that fact from? Like, and two, like, when I look at the source of where that fact came from, do I trust that source, and are they showing me good information? So for example, if we're thinking about the book bans, if we look at if there's a news article and it gives me a statistic and says something about like LGBT authors are 40% more likely to have their book banned than authors who are not LGBT. Also, let me hold on a sec because I'm seeing the chat go off. Okay, I'll take a pause after this slide to answer some of the questions that have popped up. I appreciate y'all participating. Thank you so much. So like I found that statistic in that news article lists that statistic about LGBT authors being 40% more likely to have their books banned. So I'm going to look at that and go, did they say where they pulled that from? And if the article does say it says PEN America, which is an organization that does actually follow stuff about book bans. Then I can go to their PEN America's website and look at the report that they have and see how they pulled that information, and also where they're pulling it from. It's really good these days to be very careful about our sources, especially with things like AI becoming very large, that sometimes information we find initially in an online search may not be as accurate as we would hope it would be. So being cautious about that when we're doing our research and trying to think about not just what is the depth of the issue, like how big is it, how many people does it affect, that kind of stuff, but also what are different people saying about it. So that's when it's important to look at like how different people are affected by the issue and what they are thinking about of how they would like things to change. That includes like things like looking at the history of what work have people already done, because oftentimes a lot of the problems that we are experiencing now already have a history behind them of people doing work to make it less bad. And that is, I think, a really good thing to be aware of, both in terms of seeing what strategies were effective for those groups who'd been doing the work, and also put in perspective the fact of like, it's a little, I'm going to use a metaphor of like, we move slowly. And sometimes that can feel very rough because we want progress to be these big, big movements of change that make things better very quickly. But oftentimes what we actually see are this little like inchworm that goes bit by bit of all of us working together. And again, find out what concerns people with different identities from you have about this issue. So say, for example, I am a white disabled trans person. How I am impacted by things like LGBT book bans is going to be different than another disabled trans person who is Black, because we are different races. And particularly because I'm white and our society gives an advantage to me. Whereas a Black trans disabled person is experiencing racism, and that's going to impact their perspective on these issues in a very like real way. And it's important to know the stuff that isn't a problem for me might be a problem for them. And I need to be like considerate, I need to pay attention, and I need to be mindful about how I might not be noticing that and how I might not be thinking about that when I'm coming up with solutions. Um, that also ties into notice who isn't being included in conversations. So for example, ASAN often makes a very intense, like we try a lot to make sure that like non-speaking autistic folks and autistic folks with intellectual disabilities are included in advocacy work, that they are recognized as self-advocates, they are recognized as part of movement, because sometimes they are not included at the table, and that does not get us where we need to be. And that's not actually moving in community. So paying attention to who isn't included in those conversations. And then also pay attention to the people who don't want you to reach your goal. Pay attention to what they are saying and how they are framing their argument and how they are making a case for why your goal should not happen. So I'm gonna pivot a second and take a look at what folks are saying in Q&A. All right, so Denise has asked, what type of training do you suggest for peer advocates to assist each other with communicating with doctors and managing healthcare for ADHDers in an area with no services? Ooh, that's a really hefty question. And I don't have an answer off the top of my head. However, I am going to write that down. Because I don't know of a specific training off the top of my head, but I can definitely go back to our team and see if I can get you something that there may be already existing trainings that can help peer advocates provide support to each other in medical settings. And then, let's see. Okay, so we have someone else asking about building capacity on tasks and volunteers. And I will circle back to this because I'm thinking an issue that might be happening here, Janine, is one that I'm going to talk about, of finding your spot in advocacy work. And part of finding our spot in advocacy work is recognizing what our own time, skills, and capacity are. And I think engaging with volunteers from that framework of what do you actually want to be doing? What do you actually feel really skilled at? What do you actually also have time for? Can be a really good way to sort of build that connection in a more stable fashion. While also recognizing that the thing about volunteer work is folks are volunteering. And so sometimes when their life has stuff show up that might cause them to have to shift their priorities, the thing that gets dropped is the volunteer work. So how do we also build flexibility for that when we are thinking about things? And I also see some folks have popped up in the chat. Okay. So I see someone asking, how do you discern people distorting real facts by perhaps putting a spin on it that erases a bigger or more complicated context? I've been seeing that a lot. So that's a really good question, because that does happen a lot when we look at coverage of subjects and see, like, particularly like how people are talking about issues that get a lot of attention. So I'm going to stick with the book ban. For example, when we're talking about LGBT book bans, oftentimes you'll see people put a spin on the books saying that they have inappropriate content for children, that they are talking about sexual things, stuff like that. But the key thing there, and this is why I encourage folks to go look at the sources. Like, if you notice that an article has a very hard lean in a particular direction and you feel unsure about it, go look at multiple different sources and look at how they frame things. How are they approaching the issue? Because oftentimes those articles that are saying that these book bans are about banning inappropriate content are failing to acknowledge that what those book bans are actually banning are authors of color and LGBTQ authors. And the stuff that they are citing as inappropriate are authors of color talking about very real experiences that people of color have that deal with racism. Because if you're going to have a story about characters of color, that's part of their lives because of the unfortunate system that we live in. So framing that as inappropriate is deeply, it's not only unjust, it's also really unkind, and creates a very big disadvantage for, like, it means, especially because a lot of these book bans happen in the context of schools, that children of color aren't getting to see stories about them. And it's the same thing for LGBT kids, is the stuff that's being described as inappropriate is often just a reality of LGBT experiences. And to act as if that's like not appropriate for children sends a really hard message that's really unfair to LGBT youth. So I would say doing a thing of, whenever you feel like a story has, again, when you feel like a story has a slant, and like when a fact feels strange, look it up. And even if you think that this source is correct, and you try like that, it doesn't feel like they're spinning this piece of information, still double check it against a couple other sources and see if it's consistent. I feel like that is a really good habit to get into, even though it does take more time. Okay, I see someone's looking for the breakout room for the other one. Let me see if I can get that for you. Oh, no. Mar, do you mind doing me a solid and seeing if you can grab the link to Reed's room?
Yeah, I got it. I'm
Awesome.
about to do it.
Thank you so much. No worries. We want folks to get to the places they want to be. Okay, I see the Q&A has also popped up. Okay, we have some folks that are from the first session. Hang on. Okay, awesome. I'm seeing a couple questions about sensory issues, and we are going to get into that. I'm going to move us a little bit forward so I make sure that we're keeping it on time. And then we can circle back to these questions about accessibility and conflicting access needs, and see what we can do, like see if A, I've covered what your question is, and B, if not, we can talk more about it. Okay. Okay. So another thing, again, that I really want to emphasize is, please be okay with not knowing things. It is absolutely okay to be wrong, to have wrong information, to change your mind, and to be learning. We are always going to be learning. And that's a really key part of movement. That's a key part of advocacy is the landscape changes, we change, and also we're going to be working with a lot of different people. And that means like learning about lived experiences that are really different from your own. That means people learning about you. And also someone may have have very different problems with you than you around the same issue. And recognizing that both your experiences are real. And that means that you just have to think bigger about how do you address the problem, because you might be having issue A, B, and C about this problem, but somebody else over here is having issues P, Q, and R. And all these things do need to get addressed, but it also means recognizing too, may have these guys as your top priority, but this person over here may have these as their top priority. And part of working together is figuring out, okay, how do we actually decide what is the most urgent thing to address first? And there's a lot of different approaches for that. And not every group is going to have the exact same approach. I know the approach that I personally tend to take is then looking at who's the most at risk for harm on an issue. Like basically who needs the most support and who is the most marginalized. So the way that issue is hurting them, hurting their community. And we focus on that first, because the folks who are, to me, the folks who are being impacted in the hardest way are going to be like, when we help them, that's going to have a knock-on effect and help everybody. For like a strange metaphor, perhaps, I live down in the Gulf in Texas, and it's hurricane season here. And it's the thing of recognizing that hurricane preparedness, the first folks that we have to make sure are solid and secure are the ones on the coast, because they're going to be hit first and they're going to be hit hardest. So we got to make sure that they're prepared, that they're taken care of, and that we have resources ready for if a storm does hit, that they'll be solid. And then we move slowly further inland. And it's that knock-on effect of making sure, okay, then the folks who are like an hour inland are safe, then the folks 2 hours inland. And that way we make sure everyone's needs are met. Then also recognizing somebody else's solution to a problem may not necessarily match yours. And that doesn't make one of you right and one of you wrong. I think that can be one of the hardest lessons. I know I struggled with it sometimes, of because we have different perspectives, we're going to have different solutions to problems. And that's okay. And also not necessarily a bad thing. Oftentimes the initial solution when you're first talking, say in a group meeting about we want to tackle this problem, you'll come away like everyone will probably come with multiple different ideas about how you can fix it. And then the actual idea that you end up choosing will probably be a mixture of several different concepts blended together into something that feels like the most accessible way to take action and like figure out how to get started on a problem. And then as you work on that problem, your solution will probably evolve and change because new things will pop up. Unexpected stuff will happen, good and bad. And you have to be comfortable with allowing that like wobbly flexibility. So there's also the component of when you're sharing and learning ideas, as I said, there's going to be people who you will have lived experiences that they do not, and they might be curious about it. So how do you decide how you want to respond to people asking questions about you and your identities? How much, like thinking about it in advance of like, how much do you want to personally share about yourself? When would you rather share resources about a subject instead? And also getting in the practice of if someone pushes you with a question that really makes you uncomfortable, you don't have to answer and you can be direct. I also want to share here a trick of answering the question that you wish they had asked about this subject rather than the one that they did ask. And I'm going to provide an example for you. So as I mentioned before, I'm transgender. And sometimes I'm the very first trans person another human being has met, and that's okay. But that means they might ask me questions that feel a little bit too personal for me. They might ask me questions about decisions I want to make about my body, why I have or have not done certain things. And for me, that is personally a thing I don't want to talk about with people who I'm not close with. So the game I usually play when someone asks me a personal question about my medical choices, is they'll ask me that question about my personal choices, and instead I'll actually turn it around and I'll ask them a question of like, so what are you curious about when it comes to like this health, like gender affirming healthcare, which is the term for a lot of different types of healthcare, not just for trans people, but essentially care that makes you feel more comfortable and more fully embodied in your gender, like fully yourself. And so like if someone asks me a medical question like that about my personal life, instead I'll switch it around and be like, well, what are you curious about when it comes to this kind of care? I'm happy to talk with you about that because I know a lot of stuff about the various options that people might choose and how those things affect people. Um, so figuring that out, and that can be something you can practice with folks you're comfortable with, but it also honestly is something that you might learn over time. That's a practice that I learned for myself over time, both again around my gender, but also around disability, because I'm a cane user, but I don't use it all the time. And that has generated a lot of conversation for me in various spaces that I've been over the years. And it's been a thing of sometimes I have answered a question that I wasn't really comfortable answering because I didn't know how to say no. And that's okay. You're not messing up if you do have a conversation that you really would have rathered shift and just been like, no, actually, I don't want to talk about this. That's just a time of you learning boundaries and learning how to engage with others. So let's talk about disagreeing. Um, Actually, let me pause a sec and just check. Okay. Um, Now let's talk about disagreements. I know conflict is not a lot of people's favorite thing. And it can feel very challenging, especially when we are in movement spaces, activist spaces, and we want to be working together with people. We want to be in connection with people. And so it can feel very jarring to have and a fight with others in that way. And the key thing there is how do we keep it from becoming a fight? So that's these are some basics that I have on that front of, because the thing is, most of the time, there's not going to be a clear right or wrong side in an argument. I know I'm repeating that idea a lot, but it's because it's really true. As we mentioned, like as someone asked in Jules' session, advocacy work can look different depending on where you are in the country. Not just in this country, where you are in the world, because we do have international folks in here. And also, again, whether your work is how local your work is. Are you trying to solve a problem that's local to your county, local to your state, local to your country? Are you trying to solve a problem that's international? Recognizing that scope and scale is going to shift what your problem looks like, and then also what your various tactics look like to come to a solution, and how many different perspectives are involved, right? Like, particularly think about it. If you're working on an international issue, the perspectives there are probably going to be like you're probably going to have many more perspectives on that problem than you would necessarily for an issue that maybe just affects like your city, and is a city localized problem. You're going to have fewer people involved just because of the fact that a city does not have as many people as multiple countries. But when we're thinking, so there's no right or wrong, but that doesn't stop us from being people with human emotions and our own internal sense of A, right and wrong, but also B, what we think should happen. And we get attached to that idea of what should happen in a certain problem. Um, so when we come across somebody who's like, no, you're saying X, but I think it should be Y, we can get in our feelings about it a little bit, right? And that's normal. So how do we have that conversation fairly? And I think first off, a thing that's important is focusing comments on the issue that we're talking about, not on the people we're arguing with. So say, for example, I go to a meeting that's about the book bans, and I I have this idea about how we should start talking to people and getting the word out of like maybe I think we should be going door to door and canvassing, which is canvassing is when you basically go house to house and talk to people about an issue and see what they know about it, see if they would like to be involved in any way, that kind of stuff. And someone else at the meeting, let's call them Carol. Carol thinks we should send a mail campaign. And I don't agree with her. I don't agree with Carol. I think a mail campaign is a waste of people's time. Um, if I want to have a conversation about that, what I should not do is say something about the potato salad that Carol brought that has raisins in it that I think is weird. That has nothing to do with the problem. That's just me being mean. Um, Instead, I should focus on being clear and specific about why I don't think a mail campaign would make sense. Maybe I think that would require too many resources. Maybe I think that would be like mail is not effective and it's going to cost too much money, even though canvassing will take a lot of people's time to do because they have to walk around and talk to people. I feel like it'll use our time better than spending a lot of money to send out the mail. That's me being clear and specific about my concerns. But then also, I have to be willing to work together and collectively like go with what the group decides and think about how to approach that issue. And hang on, I see someone has raised their hand. Let me. Oh, you vanished again. Okay. I'm going to assume that might have been a technical moment. And I see folks are still asking questions in the Q&A. I'll go through another slide and then we can get into that connection. Because this slide is still dealing with how do we build skills around being wrong? So again, it can be scary to admit that we didn't know something. Building that practice that accidentally causing harm does not make you a bad person, because sometimes in not knowing something and making a mistake, we will hurt other people. And we have to be comfortable with that, comfortable with the fact that we're going to hurt other people. Other people will hurt us. And it won't be on purpose and it won't be like out of mean intent, but we still have to be responsible for that. And also, we can just be wrong. We can just say something foolish or ignorant, and that's okay. We have to be willing to learn and also recognize that somebody coming to us and saying, hey, this hurt me, or I don't think you have all the right information here. That's an act of trust. That's an act of trying to work with you and have a relationship with you by hoping that you will listen to them and be interested in hearing. And then I want to check in because again, if you want to be in in movement spaces with other folks, knowing how you are going to react to those moments of conflict, to those moments where you are wrong, or when someone argues with you, it's really good to know what you need and also know what your first impulse is. Like, is your first impulse to argue with them and insist that you're right? Is your first impulse to be like, I'm gone, I'm out, I'm never coming back to another meeting, you will never see my face again, I'm even going to change my name, you will never hear from me, ever. Or is your first impulse to learn more about what they're saying? If your first impulse is to learn more about what they're saying, I think that's beautiful. Because I can't do that. And I would love to be that way. My first impulse is often to run away and change my name. I'll be completely honest. So when we recognize our first impulse upon making a mistake, that gives us a way to ask ourselves, what do we need to get past that? Whether that answer is maybe that means I need to step out of the meeting for a few minutes. If I've had a back and forth with somebody and the rest of the group thinks the other person's idea, like again, going back to this imaginary conversation with Carol, if everyone thinks that the letter writing campaign is better than canvassing, and I have feelings about that, where I'm feeling like by everyone saying no to my idea, that they're saying no to me, maybe I need a couple minutes to step outside and collect myself and let myself register that people saying no to my idea is not them saying no to me. It's not them saying that I don't belong in this space. And it's not them saying that I don't have a place in the work that we're doing. It's just them saying, you know, Alex, that idea just wasn't the idea for the moment. That's okay. Like maybe you need to step out. Maybe you need to take a minute and vent to a friend. Um, maybe you need, if you have access to therapy, maybe you need to talk to your therapist. Figuring out what you need to have boundaries to recover and like deal with the uncomfortable emotions that come up. So that way you can become more grounded in yourself and we can become better listeners. So we're about to have a shift in subject, so I will swing back in to our Q&As. Okay, so first off, we have somebody asking about, whenever I try and get involved in advocacy work with others, I find myself quickly dropping out because I can't figure out how much patience the group has for my pretty low capacity, and my PTSD makes it hard for me to focus and feel like I'm really present. How can someone like me, with issues with focus and feeling present and reading others' unspoken messages, figure these things out in a group and not be able to contribute meaningfully? That's a real one, and that's a real hard one. I think that hopefully this section will give you a little bit of insight, because maybe the answer is finding a good spot for you. Because if you have limited time and focus, and the thing is, we're all going to shift over time. Like 10 years ago, me had a lot more time and energy to give towards advocacy work than I do now, because my disabilities were different. My responsibilities to other people were different. And a lot of my life landscape was different. And so doing that reevaluation of how much I can give. Maybe you're not a I come to every meeting person. Maybe you're a person who gets called in the key moments of, like, maybe you get on a group's mailing list for an issue that you really care about, and they know, like, you are part of the group that they contact whenever they need a large number of people to, say, call up their legislators or contact the local school board, or they need folks to send, like, write letters to folks who are incarcerated and give them support and connection. Maybe that is ways you can engage with others and be a part of this work, figuring out, like, giving yourself permission to not be an everyday activist in that sense. Be a person who is periodically engaged. Maybe you only show up for special events of, like, if there's like a mutual aid event where there is a community closet, maybe you have the capacity to be a volunteer tabling at that and helping folks pick out clothes or something. Like figuring out what works with the limited energy and capacity you have. Okay, thank you, Celeste, for typing in there. Oh, that's my bad. let me figure it out on how to give participants a chance to come on mic.
I think I can unmute Celeste if you're ready to.
You both. I appreciate it. Thank you. So let's see if you can come off mute and talk for us.
Oh, yes. I'm Celeste Kagimoto. I like your speech is very nice, Alex. And, I enjoy it while I'm on Zoom with everybody. And, it's I'm so sorry that I missed some of it. Are you there, Alex?
No worries. It's going to be recorded. Yeah, I'm
okay.
here.
Yeah. Yeah. And, in the morning, I was coming on at 7:45, but nobody didn't come on at that time. So I just wanted to know, are we gonna be on for the next month again, for this one again?
This one is not a repeating workshop. It just happens once, but we will have a recording, and we will be sending out the recording both for Jules' session that happened before mine and my session and Reed's session that is happening at the same time. So everyone will be able to watch everything at a later date whenever it works for you.
Yeah, because I usually come on a Zoom meeting whenever it comes on with me. I do it every like Tuesday and Thursdays. I do Zoom meeting, and if I miss some of it, then can you guys email me?
Yeah, we can definitely send out the recordings to everyone. Like I said, this one's a one-time session, and we know all the time zone stuff gets confusing. So that's why we have them recorded, and they'll be posted on YouTube as well. So folks will be able to view these whenever they can. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Do you guys have my email address though?
If you would like to drop it in the chat, then we can have it for later.
Sure, I'll write that down for you.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Awesome. And let's see. Hang on, I do have other questions in here. Let me scroll through. Oh, yeah, Patrick, if we have time for folks to share their goals, I will absolutely open the chat for that, and give folks an opportunity to share that. Please, thank you for flagging that. We still have some questions from the first session in there, so it's a little bit harder for me to tell who's asking questions to me and who had questions for Jules. Also, I want to flag the Q&A is the spot for questions. If there's like comments or other stuff that you'd like to add, I'll try and open up the chat at some point for everyone to share with each other. But Q&A, please, if you have a question for ASAN, please drop it there. It makes it a little bit easier for me on my end. So Alyssa, we do have some resources. You're asking, how do I start a community organization or outreach group over the summer? Our PADSA resources are really good for that. They offer a lot of information on how to start a group, various ways to keep it running, how to do like media support, that kind of stuff. But that can be a good place to start and give you some ideas on what might be helpful and what you might need in terms of basics to get that running. And I see someone asking about ableist language and the question of, do you see ableist language as critical to address given it can affect autistic people? And how do we best address people using harmful language? So I think that's a really good question. We did have a section in here about how we have those like how we argue with people and when we choose to argue, like whether it's a good time to have those conflict conversations. Um, that is one of those things where it does depend, right? Especially because unfortunately, ableist language like the R word, which you mentioned in your comment, has become normalized as like casual slang in a way that people don't register that they're being hurtful anymore sometimes. And I think being able to pay attention and notice the difference between somebody who's just using words that they have not stopped to think about how those words actually hurt someone, versus somebody who has harmful intent and has mean, bigoted, judgmental intent. And I think in that case, because the thing is, like, if someone's using inappropriate language that is bigoted and they are just using it because they're thinking of it as casual slang, that I feel like for me is a much different conversation where I'm like, hey, can you talk to me about why are you using that word right now? Like, what does that word mean to you? Because I think we are thinking of that word in a different way. And I want to hear from you first before I immediately, because obviously it's a thing of like when we hear that kind of language, it can really impact us. It can really trigger emotions and get us upset. And the thing is, like, if I know for me, if I'm immediately jumping into a place where I'm angry, I'm hurt, I'm offended, then I'm not going to do as good a job, I feel like, of figuring out where that person's coming from, especially if that person is, say, say not informed or like not trying to be harmful, because like that often happens, like, again, sticking with the examples I keep using with LGBT issues, folks may not have the right language. And that happens even within the LGBT community, is folks have different words that they use. And one person might find a language choice really offensive, and another person might just use that casually. And that's like their personal, how they refer to themselves. And being able to have that conversation where it's like, I know you didn't mean it this way, but where are we coming from? Why are you using this language? And that conversation is super different from somebody who is intentionally wielding those words, like using those words to hurt people because they know those words hurt people. Like when someone uses like slurs, um, whether we're talking racial slurs, homophobic slurs, or ableist ones. There are folks who will intentionally like use that language to hurt people. And I'm not saying we don't argue with them, because like that becomes a space of personal choice and safety. Like then we have a moment where we have to think about, are they using these words towards me? Are they using these words like towards people I'm with? What is the way to move back from this conversation so everyone can be safe? Like, what does the situation feel safe? Is this a situation where like it does feel like I can be like, hey, stop that, it's mean, it's not appropriate, don't do that here? Or does this feel like a situation where maybe we need to remove ourselves? Maybe we need to, if it's possible, be like, hey, you can't, like, if you're going to do that, you can't be here. Like, you can't be in this room. Like, that's a little bit easier to, like, it feels very easy to say. It's not necessarily easy to do. And I realize that's not a simple answer. I hope it is helpful. And let me check. I don't know. I see someone has asked, is there an organization like ASAN that focuses on ADHD specifically? I do not have an answer to that question, unfortunately. That might be something we can look into and find out. Let me see. Someone else mentioned that their question got looked over. Again, thank you for your patience, everyone. There's a mixture of comments in here with the questions, so it's a little bit harder for me to see who's saying what. Okay, these are the sensory issue questions that I wanted to get into towards the end because that's the section of the presentation. Okay, the advice on a neurodiversity group at your university. I again would love to tell you, like, I would say go into the PADSA resources, especially because right now, like, we've got limited time today for me to, because I would love to actually do a breakdown. And that's something, if a lot of folks are interested in, please let us know that you would like a training on how to start a group, because that is a training we could potentially do if folks are into it. But our PADSA resources are a really good place to start in terms of like, how do you find people who are also interested in getting started? How do you figure out, because universities will vary in terms of their rules of like how you start a group. So it's a thing of like, how do you start to figure that out? When it comes to a university center, a university, I would say check with your student center because they will probably be a good place to ask questions about, hey, how do we like, how do I register as a group? What resources are available to us to find students who are interested? Organize ourselves. If there's any kind of funding, what kind of forms do we need? I feel like your student center might be able to give you specific ideas on how to do that on your particular campus. I'm also very aware that I talk very long and I'm gonna pause again on Q&A and switch back into the slides. And so now I'm going to talk in about how do you figure out what your spot is in self-advocacy. So using your skills. And this is the place where that question about burnout, about limited capacity and resources, this is kind of the zone for that. So some things to think about when just trying to decide where to start is, how much time do you have for advocacy work? Do you have time every week? Do you only have time like a couple hours each month? Maybe you don't even have, maybe that's not even where you're at right now. Maybe you can do stuff like every couple months, or like maybe if you have enough advanced warning, you can be part of something that's like several months away. Like think about how much time you have to give and like how often. And then also think about what your own like personality and preferences are. Do you really like meeting and talking with new people? How do you like meeting and talking with new people? Do you prefer working in a routine? Like, do you like having like, this is your set advocacy role, this is what you do. You show up at this time on this day and you do these tasks, and that's your thing. Or do you like having spontaneity? Do you like not really knowing what you're going to do each time? And it can vary. What tasks are you good at? And also, what tasks do you enjoy doing? And then I think in webs. So this is just a little web that provides an example here. Looking at the circle on top, which is green, it says public facing roles. And so public facing roles are the ones where you're interacting with people. That's how I view them. You're interacting with people and that's your primary job. So for example, I have peer counselor. A peer counselor is, I believe someone asked a question on that front of like, a peer counselor is somebody who y'all are part of the same community and you are helping other people know their rights, access resources, get information, and basically like helping them get connected around issues that y'all might have in common. And Celeste, I do see that your hand is raised. Let me finish this slide and then I'll let you speak. So then another option is media representative. So media representative might be somebody who you're doing interviews with the news, or maybe especially in the era of social media, maybe you're front facing on if you're doing like Reels or TikTok or or like even YouTube videos. You are choosing to be you're choosing to have your face out there. You're choosing to be somebody who is a voice, who's doing interviews, who's talking about the issue and trying to spread awareness. And awareness specifically like to folks that you want to take action on an issue. Whereas like a community educator is somebody like technically what I'm doing right now is community education. I am facilitating this workshop. I am sharing information with all of you in the hopes that you will take this information and share it with other people. I am part of the same community and I am talking with you about this and basically trying to like share information and teach you skills. Then we get down into this corner and it says mixed roles. And those are things where it switches back and forth between your behind the scenes and then your public facing. And so that might be you're sharing information just within your group. So say your organization might have 3 other orgs that you work with. Maybe you are the person who's the go-between, who whenever your group has a meeting, then you turn around and you share updates with those other 3 groups and say, hey, our group met, we talked about A, B, and C, and we're going to do P, Q, and R. Just keeping you updated. I might need to ask you for X, Y, and Z in order to get our goals done. What have y'all done recently? Like that's a mixed role to me. Another one might be getting mutual aid to people. So maybe you're a person who is like, you're coordinating mutual aid is basically like everybody's putting resources in the pot and anybody can pull them out and share them depending on who needs them in that moment. So maybe you're a person who is collecting, like as a mixed role, you might be the person who is collecting money for bail funds, but also making sure that those bail funds get to the right people. Another option is being a proxy caller. So ASAN actually has a proxy caller network that we will sometimes activate when we have enough time to allow folks of, if you cannot call your legislator, instead what you can do is you can write down what you want to say, include the information about who your government representatives are, and the proxy caller will make the phone call on your behalf. And they will say, I'm calling on behalf of Alex Grandstaff about issue X, Y, and Z, and their representative is this person. And so that's like a mixed role. And then we have like behind the scenes stuff. So maybe you don't like being in the front of things. Maybe you like to just kind of be like in the background, creating stuff, working with people, like coordinating things, but you've got a small team that you really engage with. You're not out in the community, really putting forward in that way. So behind the scenes role might be writing easy read resources. So taking like an important issue, like say, again, I'm just going to use the book bans example. Like you know a book ban is coming into, like, you know, your local school district is going real heavy into book bans, but many people may not understand exactly what that means and why that's a problem. So maybe you write a guide about what book bans are, why they hurt the community, and what people can do about it. And you write it in easy read, which is an accessible format that allows more people to understand the breadth of the issue, like how big the issue is, who's impacted, etc. Or maybe you really like planning things. Maybe you want to be the one to plan like your fundraiser or a rally or that kind of thing. You like all the little steps that take to like coordinate people and get out information and that kind of like get the little details that bring everybody together, but you want to work with a small team. Then there's also scheduling volunteers where you have, because I also came up here of like, you need somebody to work the front desk at an event but you also need somebody to be part of making sure that folks get stuff from the food pantry that you have. Like figuring out what those volunteer roles are and then figuring out which volunteers should go into what spot. That might be a role for you. Okay. I know we were both tight on time. Hang on. Because my clock has vanished on me because I'm in full screen. Yeah, I'm sorry, y'all. I might have to keep us moving. And then the last batch of questions might have to be at the end. I appreciate your patience. I also really appreciate your engagement. But questions to think about when we're talking about using your skills in self-advocacy. Again, do you like meeting and talking to new people? Do you prefer to do your work alone and pass it on to someone else? Or are you good at figuring out how much time is needed to plan something? Like, are you good at finding resources to make a goal happen? And do you like writing about subjects that are important to you? These are just a small number of questions that you can ask yourself, but I feel like they're really good starting points to kind of figure out like, what stuff are you really good at? What stuff do you like? And I do have an example that I want us to apply this to. So I want to introduce y'all to Carly. And I want to be clear, Carly isn't real. I've made her up. But Carly is a self-advocate with an intellectual disability. And Carly is also bisexual. A group in her city is trying to ban LGBTQ plus books from local libraries. Carly and her friends use the library a lot, and they don't want the books to be banned. So keeping on with that, Carly and her friends don't want these books to be banned. Carly wants libraries to be safe places that everyone can go to. She wants to work with a local group to try and stop the changes to the library, but she's not sure where she might fit in. So things Carly likes is Carly likes talking to people. She teaches workshops about disability rights issues at her local community center. But Carly's not very organized, and she finds planning things stressful and boring. What are thinking about the roles I mentioned and those questions of, so she likes talking to people and she already does teach workshops about disability rights. So those are skills that she has versus Carly is not organized and she doesn't like planning things. So what might Carly enjoy trying out? And now I'm going to actually open the chat and allow folks who have ideas to share what are ideas that you think Carly could try to be part of this campaign against the book bans. So she could be great for making phone calls or presentations, totally. She already has teaching skills and she likes talking to people. Both of those could be good roles for like spreading the word and educating others. There's also leafletting door to door. So leafletting would be basically talking door to door, and leafletting is like you can make little printouts that are written up and talk to people, use them as talking points for people, but also something that you leave with them to give them more information. Someone has said, I would start by networking with people like her who would take her side in this situation and come up with a solution as a team. Definitely like finding folks who are already thinking about this, perhaps peer educator or proxy caller. Totally, I think she could definitely give those a try. And I'm saying try here because I think it's a really important thing to allow ourselves to try on roles when we're getting into advocacy work or coming back into it and figuring out what feels good for us. Yeah, she could definitely recruit her friends who also use the library and care about the library. Thank y'all. These are some good ideas. I'm gonna shut the chat again for access reasons and then give us a chance. I'm gonna move through again and hopefully I'm gonna come in just with enough time for folks to share out. So building movement and getting other people involved. Again, this is the point at which that question about, say, when folks are using bigoted language and also when folks have different ideas from you. When you're getting other people involved, what you want to look for first are the people who are interested but may not know much, care but don't know where to start, or do not know about this issue but will care if you talk to them, or the folks who have bad information if you give them, but will listen if you give them good information. And I want you to think about those as sort of the order in which you should approach those folks. The folks who are going to be kind of the easiest are the ones who are both interested and don't know where to start, and care but don't know much. Excuse me. Those folks are going to want to engage with you probably. They're going to be interested, they're going to want to have those conversations, and they probably will be more interested in being active and being engaged and taking steps. So focusing on that group first. And you can do that in a lot of different ways, from just talking with, like if a conversation comes up, like say, if you're working and a coworker brings up a subject that's relating to your issue and it gives you a chance to talk with them about it and just be like, oh yeah, like again, if we're talking about book bans, like someone brings it up of just like, yeah, I heard the libraries. I was like, the libraries are getting these bans in about certain books. And you can be like, yeah, I have heard about that. It's actually like we're starting to see more of it. And I'm kind of concerned. And that can open up a space where someone can ask you, well, why are you worried about that? And you can start to give them more information. Like that can be like casual conversation can be a place, but that this can also be a place of, as was mentioned, going door to door or leafletting or even holding an event at like at a community center or in an area that feels like an easy place to do it, whether that's in person or virtually. Like doing an event, particularly you can do events that have a combination of, maybe there's a fun element, like if you're doing a virtual event, maybe you're showing a documentary that's relating to the issue that you care about. And then there's also a discussion afterwards. And that can be a way to get people involved, teach them about the issue, and then really get them to potentially become more engaged with it. And then also, I really want to mention, don't try to convince people who have no interest in caring, and don't try and change the minds of people who are being hateful on purpose. I mean, I'm not trying to speak in absolutes on that front. I have just found in my experience, the people who are committed to not understanding you are also committed to wasting a lot of your time, your energy, and really like hurting your feelings, frankly, in order to take away that time and energy from the work you could actually be doing. And so when it comes to folks who don't care, like if they don't care and they're completely just uninvolved, don't want to deal with it, then you don't need to engage with them. And the people who actively are trying to be harmful, are trying to be hateful, those are folks who, instead of trying to convince them to change their mind, the work there is you're working with the folks who are on the same page as you, who want like the same goal as you, to basically try and keep this person from stopping you in whatever ways that they might be trying to do that. And then we have, again, getting the other people involved, connecting that issue into their lives, showing them how it relates to them, and also giving them information on how to talk about the issue so they can feel more comfortable and confident if it comes up in their life with other people they're talking to. Be like, yeah, I've been learning about that lately. Did you know X, Y, and Z? And also think creatively about how to reach other folks. So you can reach them in person, say like at your work, at school, in social groups, your religious groups, wherever you might be attending, but also online at forums, blogs, through email campaigns. There's also traditional news like op-eds that come in the newspaper, which are opinion pieces. And most local newspapers have an op-ed section where you can just write in and say, like, you can either write in response to an article, or you can write in talking about an issue you care about. And our PADSA resources do actually give you information on how to do that. There's also doing interviews with either written news or TV news. And then there's also paper methods. So again, those printed out leaflets. You can do flyers at community centers, posters in coffee shops, mail campaigns. There's a lot of different ways to catch people's attention, and don't be afraid to be creative with it. Art can be a really good way, like a really eye-catching poster can get someone's attention. That kind, like a video, that kind of stuff can be ways to get people engaged. Getting other people involved. So let's look back to Carly's example with the book ban of example talking points. So things Carly might use are books written by and about people of color are more likely to be banned than books by and about white people. Books written by and about LGBTQ plus people are also more likely to be banned than books by and about straight people. And that means those bans hurt people of color and LGBTQ plus people who do not get to see stories with them in it, and also receive this message that somehow their actual lives are not okay to be talked about. And because of that, these bans encourage racism and homophobia by saying people of color and LGBTQ plus people are not appropriate. And then this statistic is obviously made up because Caboose County is not a real county, but 40% of Caboose County are people of color, and 10% of Caboose County is LGBTQ plus. And the libraries are meant to serve their community. So these talking points are aligned here to highlight who is hurt by this ban, how are they hurt by the ban, and then link that back directly into the community that you are trying to move into motion, get into motion, and get to engage. We are basically at time. I do have some more slides. I recognize not everybody can stick around, so I'm not offended if you need to leave. And I want to say thank you for your time today. I know there are some folks who still have questions. And I'm sorry that I will not be able to get to all of them. I will go through all of the slides, however. And if folks do want to hang around to do a quick Q&A, Mar, I also understand that you may not be able to because you may have prior commitments, but I can do this for the remainder of the session. But I'm going to go through these slides. And again, thank y'all so much for coming, and we appreciate your time. So first, let's talk about, like, now we're still on getting the other people involved. I'm going to skip this example since we're out of time. But yeah. I again want to say you cannot change other people's minds until they are ready to change. If you've tried your best to talk it out, that's my fault. If you've tried your best to talk it out with someone and they still don't agree with you, that's not your fault. We will change our minds on something when we are ready to. And sometimes we need to talk about this over and over again or have multiple different experiences around an issue before we are ready to shift how we think about it. So I want to be clear, you're not wasting your time if you do talk with somebody and they still come away from your conversation not agreeing with you or keeping the same opinion that they had, because sometimes we need to do that over and over again before we can really be ready to shift. And that's just part of the human experience. Now I want to talk about accessibility, and I want to thank everybody who is asking these questions earlier for their patience. This will be recorded. This is recorded and it will be posted. So there's a few things to consider when we're talking about trying to make our work accessible to other people. So one thing is writing resources in plain language and easy read. And we will be sending out, a one pager that has some resources in it that includes one idea at a time, which is one of our toolkits. One idea per line, which is one of our toolkits about writing in plain language and easy read, which are accessible formats that make whatever issues you're talking about more accessible to more people. And so like one idea per line gives you a basic rundown of like how to get started writing, particularly in easy read. And then other things accessible, translating resources into languages spoken in your area, having live captioners for online meetings. Like this meeting has a person who is writing our captions for us, offering different ways for people to participate. So like being aware that not everybody, again, that goes back to not everyone's public facing. Not everyone can be behind the scenes. Not everyone can show up every day or even every week. So how are we creating opportunities for people to be engaged in this work and with still being mindful of their capacity and what they do have in terms of being able to do? Also making it a practice to talk through access needs that conflict with each other. As someone I think mentioned in the first session, sometimes our access needs are not like, they don't play well together. And we need to be able to handle that. So for example, this is an example that I'll talk through of, so Carly and Alok are both part of the same group, but Carly makes a lot of repeating mouth noises as a stim, and she gets distracted by movement around her. Whereas Alok gets stressed out by repeating noises. They flap their hands and they flap their hands in order to stim. So Carly's stim is stressing Alok out, and Alok's stim is distracting Carly. Both are stimming because the meetings require everyone to sit still for a long period of time. So what are some solutions that the group can come up with to meet both Carly and Alok's needs? And in this case, what my immediate thought is the key point here is both of them are stimming right now because the meetings require everyone to sit still. And so then I think a question, particularly when we're talking about conflicting access needs, a good thing I think to check in with is seeing why are certain people having a need that they are, and can we restructure the group as a whole to make that no longer an issue. So in this case, with this example, if the do the meetings need to require everyone to sit for a long time? Can folks be allowed to get up and walk around or move around? Can folks be allowed to stand or lie down or be in whatever body position is more comfortable for them? Because if we can take away the stress point that is like making Carly and Alok both need to take care of themselves by stimming, that might be able to handle part of that problem. There's still the secondary step of sometimes both of them may still need the stim anyway. And then figuring out, okay, how do we deal with that? Maybe Alok wears noise canceling headphones. Maybe Carly sits in a spot where she can't see Alok. So if Alok is flapping their hands, it's not going to cause an issue for Carly. And if Carly is making mouth noises, Alok won't hear them. figuring those things out. And again, framing it as nobody in this position is right or wrong. We just have different needs. And how can we show up for each other and be considerate around that? Again, competing access needs don't always need to be a deal breaker. And working as a group can help reduce those conflicts and share the responsibility of making sure everyone is supported and comfortable. So as opposed to creating a space where competing access needs are something that like, whichever people are having the issue, they need to work it out amongst themselves. Instead, let's think about how are we functioning as a whole, as a group, that we can shift how the group looks and how the group acts to be more accessible for everyone. And then look at how things are functioning from that point once we've done those shifts as the group as a whole, and see if then we still need to make some individual changes. And now let's talk also about, obviously we still have the ongoing pandemic. And as Jules mentioned, we're no longer seeing as much support from systemic structures around the pandemic, which can make organizing even harder. Meeting online obviously reduces the risks the most, but if you do have to do in-person things, there are some ways that you can reduce those risks. So one can be requiring everyone who can mask to mask, requiring that everybody has up-to-date COVID vaccines and boosters to come to an event, asking folks to test before an event and that they test negative before coming in. And also having air purifiers if you're doing do things outdoors, but if you can't, like for example, where I live, we're hitting 100 degrees during the day. So that makes it hard to do things outside. So when you're having indoor things, making sure you've got really good ventilation and having portable air purifiers on hand can really help reduce those risks. Because that's the thing. When we're talking about COVID, we're talking about risk reduction. We can't eliminate that outside of working exclusively online. But thinking about those things can really make your spaces more accessible, make it more possible for more people to be engaged and show up with you. Okay, I've managed to get through all the slides. I think there are still some folks who have questions and would like to talk. I see there's 2 hand raises, so I will allow those. And then see about the Q&A. Again, I appreciate the patience. I know we went a long over time, but yeah, I'll raise hands, folks. I think Celeste, you had your hand up. Oh, maybe not. All right, David, you have your hand up. You should be able to speak now.
Oh, yes. What is the sub advocacy about?
I'm sorry, do you mind repeating that for me?
What is the sub advocacy about?
Accessible advocacy? I think I'm understanding. Accessible advocacy. So in that case, what we're talking about is how can we make sure that the people who want to be doing the work with us are able to by meeting their needs. So let me go back a few slides because I have some examples of, come on, bud. Here we go. So when we're talking about accessible advocacy, we're thinking about different ways we can make sure more people can be involved with us. So that's why I included things like translating resources into languages. So that's why I included things like how do we like translating resources into languages that are spoken in your area? So folks that don't like, a lot of stuff where I live is predominantly in English, but we have a lot of folks who speak Vietnamese, who speak Hindi, and who speak Spanish in my area. So if I want to be able to make sure that those folks that can work with them and they know information about stuff that like I'm doing, then I can see about how can I get the resources I'm making translated into those languages so they can then that so I can work with them. Um, Same thing as live captioning. That can be helpful for folks who have language processing, who who are deaf. Same thing with ASL interpreters. These are different ways in which we can make sure people can engage with us and actually participate, as opposed to being stuck in a kind of not nice place where they're sort of able to participate, but a lot of time they're spent struggling to actually be part of the work because they have a barrier. They have something that's in the way of them fully participating or fully understanding everything that's happening. So that's what we mean when we're talking about accessibility. I hope that answers your question. And I will answer because we are over and I don't want to keep anybody far much longer. I see someone else has raised their hand. Ryan, I will answer your question and then I think I'm going to have to call it for the night. Thank you so much, everybody. Ryan, you are unmuted. You should be able to talk. Or you might need to unmute yourself in order to speak.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
All right. So in the Q&A, was asking like a semi question, but also like presenting some sort of solution to help basically all autistic people, maybe internationally, because I was thinking of like becoming like a human rights activist, and that's part of the reason why I joined this webinar thing, see what I can do. But I don't know if you would agree with my solution, but my solution is kind of similar to what the liberals kind of been doing, where like things like censorship and police crackdown on hate groups and more inclusiveness, like more autistic people in movies and TV shows and commercials. Like I feel like if because personally I feel like that we do a lot of advocacy, but we don't take enough action, especially in trying to stop these, hateful neurotypicals that, not saying all neurotypicals are bad, but some of them I'm pretty much are definitely hateful. And I feel like some of them just can't understand that what the way they think is wrong. So I feel like the only solution is to take the fight to them. I'm not saying advocacy doesn't work, but in some cases it does. But I feel like it's probably much better to just, engage in something a little bit beyond advocacy.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Ryan. I think so I think there's a lot of different ways we can engage in movement and engage in advocacy work. And I think that's part of finding our own spot. I think representation is a really important thing. And I think there is something to be said for folks who decide that they do want to directly engage. I know I gave the framework of you don't need to engage with folks who are actively saying bigoted things. But if that feels like your calling, where you want to be the person to directly argue with them, that is okay. That is a choice you can make. Yeah. And I think engaging too in like in preventative work, in education, in understanding, to help curb the ways in which people can, without even realizing they're digesting and getting filled with these hateful ideas. That can happen sometimes for folks as they get really locked into these ideas that they don't know are harmful until they're so deep in them that it's really hard for them to change. So creating that space of representation, of education, of normalizing, like particularly on the front of things of disability and autism, can be a really important thing to help kind of create a protection against folks getting stuck in that, against folks getting stuck in this place where they get really locked into this toxic perspective that's really hurtful. Celeste, I do see we do have your email, so I will circle back with you. I'm sorry because we're almost 30 minutes over time, and I appreciate so greatly that everyone has stuck it out this long. That's really lovely, and I really appreciate y'all coming in and engaging with us on this. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I want to say thank y'all for coming today. Thank you for listening and engaging. Thank you for all your questions, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I'm going to go ahead and close this out for the evening. Take care, y'all.